right, everyone. Welcome to the Route Consultant weekly webinar. It's my first webinar of 2025. We did one last week, but I wasn't here. So welcome everyone to 2025. For those of you who are here for the first time, if you've never been to one of these webinars, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Operations here at Route Consultant. And if you're not familiar with Route Consultant, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and Linehaul. And today, what these webinars are for is both to help current contractors who are already in the space to stay abreast of all the things that are happening, to kind of be a place that we can bring all the information together and present it to everybody so that we all can learn together and find ways to be successful together. And also for new buyers, new people looking to get into the space for the first time, that this can be a place where you can come, learn, ask questions, and figure out if it's the right space for you or not. If you're here every week, welcome back. And again, whether you're brand new or you've been coming to these webinars for years, we always want this to be a place where you can come, learn, and ask questions. And to help with that, we'll have a pure Q&A session at the end of today when we get to kind of through our content. Before I go too much farther, though, I do have a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Now, now that we've gotten through all of that, a reminder, I just mentioned it from the Q&A side, though. If you have questions about anything that we're talking about today, there is a Q&A button if you're here on Zoom where you can go ahead and type those questions in and submit them to us. It's at the bottom of the window. I'll see it, and I promise we'll get to it. At the end of the content today, we will go through a pure Q&A and answer as many questions as we have time for. If you're watching later on YouTube or even watching live on YouTube, you can send those questions to us. If we don't get them to them immediately, since we won't be there to answer those YouTube questions live, we can bring them into next week, or you can submit them to us over email and we'll get to them at some point. So it's the beginning of the year, and there's a couple of things that we want to really walk through and focus on today. There are a few really important administrative and legal things that you need to be aware of as we get into the beginning of the year. If you are a current contractor, or if you're about to start, there's still some things you need to be aware of that are happening in these first couple of months. We're also going to talk a little bit about weather again and what the pros and cons are of running in weather, since there have been some safety challenges recently, very recently, over these last few weeks as we're looking at snow and how that affects the network. So we've brought Alex Froome back on to talk through it all. And so, Alex, you can say hello and we can get started.
Hello, welcome to 2025.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to writing 2025. It's only happened a couple of times, but I'm almost used to it now.
Well, I mean, I've been doing my maintenance reports, and so I did catch myself, I think, about halfway through when I realized I was putting still 2024 on them. So had to update all that.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling pretty confident about 2025. I think this is going to be a good year for being a FedEx contractor. So.
Perfect. That's what we want to hear. And I'm bullish and optimistic too. So it's good to hear that, at least we've got the optimism early, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a lot of opportunities for growth with the One FedEx initiative. We're going to see that ramping up. Hopefully we continue to get, these animal spirits going on and everybody's excited about Trump and we still get people buying stuff and, spending money on credit. So it should all be good.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Go wrong, right? Um, but yeah, so I want to talk a couple things about the annual, what's coming up right now since it's January. So the first one is base plates. Now, if you do your own base plates, that's up to you. Then you have your own way to go. But if you're using FedEx and you elect to use FedEx to provide you with base plates, the world is divided into people who can just get their base plates and people who actually have to sign a letter authorizing FedEx to request base plates on their behalf. Either way, you have to make sure that all your tractor files are up to date. So just reach out to your admin and say, hey, we're good to go. You got my elections. And she'll tell you, he or she will tell you, yeah, you're good to go. Or no, I need you to, I need these annual reports. I need these heavyweight tax reports, or I need you to sign this letter for me. The states where you need to submit a letter, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but you can come back and ask either me or Josh and we can go over them, or you can find it on My Ground Biz. but it's California. If you are operating in, so if your truck is domiciled in these states, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, um, sorry, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Rhode Island, South Dakota, and West Virginia. Unfortunately, I do not operate in any of those states, so I don't know what the letter entails. But FedEx will have provided you with that letter. Just go into MGBA, download it, sign it, and then return it back to your senior admin. And they will, and if you are in a station and they don't know what to do with this letter, tell them to submit the letter to PGH to the woman that handles tractor files, or the man or woman who handles tractor files for that station.
Yeah, and I think it's important. It's really important to understand a couple of things. One, some of you may have never had to do this. Maybe you grew this year, and it's the first time that you're domiciled in one of those states. So just be aware of some of those changes. And MigrantBiz will kind of alert you, but if you're not checking those messages often, you can miss them. And so, one, that's a big thing. Two, Alex mentioned it a couple of times. Tractor files. Just for those of you who are new, if you're looking to get into the line haul space, one of the biggest check marks you'll have to do is filling out tractor files, where there's a lot of information that has to be updated and correct and submitted to FedEx and signed off by senior management before you can stand up on a business. So anytime we talk about it, I try to re-highlight it, because if you're buying one of these and you haven't heard of tractor files and you think you're about to close, you're not about to close if you haven't done one of these tractor files for every single tractor that you're going to be taking on.
Yeah, they're not that hard, but it's just something that, it's kind of intimidating to look at the first time.
Okay.
But, the guys and gals at Route Consultants can help you out. We also have, I believe, in the master class, an actual checklist and a step-by-step process to submit the tractor files. Once you get used to it, it becomes old hat. But it's a little bit paper intensive, and it's something that you have to submit to FedEx, and then they maintain a file in paper format somewhere in the FedEx universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so the next thing is CARB 27. So, as of January 1st, anyone that's operating or runs trucks into or out of California is subject to CARB 27. What it means that this year is that if you operate a vehicle that has a 2009 engine or older, which pretty much anybody that has a tractor shouldn't have, unless you've somehow figured out how to put an F-cam on a Detroit 60. But just in the odd event that you're operating a tractor that's that old, or if you're in the P&D world, which there are a lot of guys, you must register your vehicle with the state of California. There is additional paperwork that you need to do. Anybody that has vehicles that are newer than 2010 model year, which is pretty much every single TSP or line haul operator, you don't have to do anything at this time. But anybody that is new, has older vehicles, you need to register your vehicle to make sure that you're in compliance. FedEx has a really good explanation of what you need to do. And if you have any questions, I'm sure that the line haul administrators in California can walk you through on a step-by-step basis of exactly what you need to do.
Just to re-highlight what Alex said at the beginning, it's not just those who are domiciled in California. If you have any runs that go into or out of California, then you're subject to it. So if you've got an old spare vehicle, I would assume still, like if you've got something that you're not running actively, but you've got kind of around, if it's an older engine potentially, that's still subject to these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. And then there is a requirement for, like, for example, for me, I have a couple teams that go into and out of California. So I am very sensitive to this, because even though I don't operate, nor am I domiciled in California, because I enter the state of California, that subjects my fleet to these CARB 27 requirements. So I'm paying attention to it. I'm doing a lot of reading on it and making sure I understand what the implications are for my fleet once CARB 27 comes along. And the biggest thing is it's just going to be additional paperwork that I have to provide. We're allowed to a certain extent, model year 2027 vehicles in the future will have to be CARB 27 compliant. And then any existing vehicles that you have in your fleet are allowed to be grandfathered in for a period of, I think it's until 2033. So
So it's important to pay attention to, but it's not like next year all of my vehicles are about to be useless type of thing.
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. And then finally, the last thing is just annual reports. Remember that you have to file an annual report, not only for the state that you are organized in. So for me, I'm organized in the state of Illinois. So that was where I started my company up. You can start it up and you can actually start it up anywhere you want. But wherever you decide to start up your company, you are organized in. And then every state that you operate in, you need to file an annual report for. Most of those states, you'll probably have a foreign entity license or a foreign alien corporation license, which I love. And those, you have to file an annual report there to make sure that your company is in good standing. You've notified them if you have any address changes, who your president, secretary, and in some states you actually need to identify a treasurer, who's on your board of directors, and you need to provide all that information to each state. And then actually each state is highlighting that you need to do your the FinCEN information filing, which your accountant or your legal representation can take care of on your behalf. But that is a requirement for all corporations. You need to do your financial crimes um, filing as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we highlight a lot of these things. None of them are necessarily difficult, but forgetting any of them can have implications. I guess what would be if somebody didn't do one of these reports that we talked about today, what's the implication?
For example, you'd probably have to file. I mean, one is that you might face fines or fees. Your company might be considered delinquent. If it's delinquent and FedEx gets notification of this, they'll probably ask you to give you an OTC. And you have 45 days to respond. You have 45 days in that period to figure out how to get yourself back into good standing. So FedEx requires all their TSPs and I assume all their ISPs to be registered and in good standing with their with whatever states that they operate in. I mean, it's really easy. I mean, I just did 5 states in 15 minutes. I mean, it cost me. I think Tennessee was $20.69. Um, Mississippi was like $17.69. Colorado was $100 and Illinois was $75 and Kentucky was like $15. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's no big deal. You just have to file it. Some states have a requirement to do the same thing with counties. I mean, that is a reason why you need to talk to your accountant or to your lawyer to make sure that you are following all the rules and regulations for wherever you operate in. It's not rocket science. It's just paperwork that you have to file. And it needs to be done. Most states require it to be done by April 1st or April 15th.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder, one, to do all of these things that Alex has talked about today, but just this is the right time of year, before when things are a little bit slower as you're coming out of peak, but right before kind of normal volume hits, that you need to kind of pay attention to some of the administrative things you need to do, but also really start to reset things like any kind of recruiting or payroll that you've spun up for peak season and any kind of vehicle things that you want to pay attention to before the volume in the year gets crazy. This is kind of the right time of year where volume's slower, a little bit slower, but you want to really make sure that you are doing everything possible to prepare yourself for the rest of the year.
Well, the other thing is that it's necessary for the annual reports that we have to certify with FedEx. Those you get notified usually in March, typically for that. And I think it's usually about 60 days that we have to certify all this information. We'll have to certify that we've paid taxes. We have to certify that all our employees are W-2 and not 1099. Um, and we have to certify that we are in good standing with every single state we operate in. And then you actually have to provide the contact information of your certified public accountant to make sure that if they have any questions, they can reach out to that CPA to verify that all these things have taken place. So, I mean, it's just a good practice to do it all now, so you're prepared when that document comes out in March.
Perfect. So if you have questions about any of those, or if you're trying to figure out what you do and don't have to do based on the state, we'll know most of those answers. Sometimes if it's a super state specific question, we'll have to find it, but we can find it for you. So just feel free to reach out to us. And if you're trying to go through and figure out some kind of complication there that you're not finding the answers easily, we're
And
happy to help. Yeah.
and this is why it's important to actually have a good accountant that you have a good relationship with. Like I probably talk to my accountant. I mean, I at least talk to my accountant once a month. Between now and April 15th or March 15th, I will probably talk to my accountant 2 or 3 times a week. Um, I regularly talk to my accountant. I talk to my accountant a lot more than I talk to my lawyer. My lawyer, is very rarely, unless I have some kind of legal issue that comes up with a former employer or something like that. But you need to have a good accountant, somebody that you can text or call on a daily basis, and then you can get advice from. He is probably your most important third party provider that you're going to be in operate while you're a TSP. Yeah.
A great call out. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about weather. So, if you've not been hiding under a rock, you'll be aware that we're actually still suffering from a Armageddon, I think, right now, the cold again. I mean, Tennessee, is that still snow I see in the background back there, Josh, in
We do
Tennessee?
still have a little bit of snow. Yeah. So I'll say that we're holding on to it. I was just one of my coworkers, they had a planned snow day for today. Even though they got out on Monday, his kids still got out early today, even though there's literally nothing on the road. So it's just how we operate.
Yeah. So there's been snow, there's been icy conditions, and actually right now in California there's fire and smoke.
Yeah.
So, um, just so you know, there is no expectation by FedEx senior management that you will dispatch out during inclement weather. Okay. Your dispatcher might say, "Hey, why don't you go out?" And I mean, that doesn't matter. Senior management wants you to be safe. They do not want you getting into accidents, okay? Remember, it's going to cost FedEx a lot more than it costs you, and for you, it costs a lot of money if you get into an accident. So remember, do not dispatch when you are in unsafe or hazardous conditions. Okay, there is actual protection legally from in this situation. CFR or 49 CFR 392-14 or period 14 is a federal motor safety administration regulation that requires commercial motor vehicle carriers and their drivers to exercise extreme caution when hazardous conditions affect visibility or traction. Okay, so this governs both motor carriers and drivers. Additionally, in the TSPA and in Schedule E, it says it's repeated multiple times in our contract that both Federal Express Corporation and the TSP acknowledge 49 CFR 392-14 and that we are governed by it. Okay, so in what does this mean? What does this regulation mean at the bare bones? When hazardous conditions exist, it being wet, it being icy, visibility is poor, you are required to slow down. The language is actually must. Drivers and motor carriers must reduce speed when hazardous conditions exist. Okay. And then following that, it actually says that drivers and motor carriers must stop driving if conditions become dangerous. Okay. That this is really, really important to understand. There is federal requirements that you are not to dispatch out in dangerous conditions. Okay. This happens to go back a long time ago when the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration was established and the rules that govern it to prevent drivers from driving, 48, 72 hours straight through and never taking any breaks. So there's a lot of protections there, but this is what governs us and what allows you to take a safety decline. So, for example, last week, I told all my drivers to stay at home multiple days in a row. I took the hit. We're not going to make any revenue. My drivers understood they're not going to get paid, but it was much more important to me that we were safe and no one was at risk instead of dispatching out to get packages out there. My drivers and their lives are more important to me than making sure that some package gets from point A to point B. And FedEx has the same opinion themselves. Now, That being said, I did have a couple teams that were still out when these hazardous conditions existed. Two of them, I told them to stop in place and wait out the storm. One of the teams I put up in a hotel room because it was going to last for a couple days and they weren't going to be able to get out. One of the other one, we worked with FedEx to identify alternate routing so they could drive around the storm to get to their location. And then FedEx acknowledged that they don't have actually approved routing for that. And so they're going to give me a settlement adjustment after I submit the miles that they got. So FedEx was willing to work as long as you're upfront and explain what you're going to do and they understand you are looking at this from a safety perspective. FedEx is going to acknowledge that you are being a safe operator and make sure that, they're not going to put any pressure on you to dispatch. Now, that being said, once road conditions clear, they're going to be like, hey, get them in here. We have 110 trailers to get out the door. And they're going to put all that pressure on you to get your drivers to come in and run on a Sunday or run on a Monday when they typically don't run. But it's really, really important because understand this, if you get into a rear end collision due to unsafe conditions, they're going to say that's a preventable accident because you shouldn't have been on the road. And then you're going to get hit with a $35,000 indemnification fee because that's where the indemnification starts for a rear end collision.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where in P&D sometimes you still probably shouldn't be out on the road, but there are the accidents you get in on the pickup and delivery side are just smaller accidents. If you're line haul, those accidents, it's almost never going to be a small accident if you're out on the road, especially in conditions like this. You're probably going to be joining several people who are getting into an accident when these conditions hit. And not only is it the life of the driver, which is the most important, but it's also all of these other expenses, both the damage to your vehicle, the potential damage to your contract. There's all kinds of things that happen in these types of accidents that just aren't worth that one day of revenue.
Yeah. It's definitely never worth it. And actually drivers will appreciate if you're going to go out to bat and make sure that they don't drive. Like I've told drivers hey, I think I can make it. Nope, you're staying home. That's not worth the risk. I learned that really quickly back when I was a brand new contractor. The conditions looked beautiful between here and between Kentucky and Illinois. And then we had to go 19 miles into Illinois and the conditions became a pure whiteout. And my driver was, on the road and he was driving 5 miles an hour trying to find the next exit so he could pull off the road. And he missed the exit, or he thought he turned off onto the exit. He thought he saw it. It was whiteout conditions. He actually drove off the embankment. And I got hit with, my driver should never have been on the road in the first place. It was a preventable accident. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I argued it, nope, it was a preventable accident and it absolutely ruined my business. I wasn't able to bid on any runs for 6 months because it took me over into a tier 2 safety. It was just a nightmare all the way around.
Yeah. All kinds of effects that are just not worth the risk.
Yeah. Knock on wood, I'm a tier 4 safety now because I've put in place all these procedures and rules and policies in place that we don't dispatch in inclement weather. If you're out on the road already, that you either do a ground stop or you find the next closest, safest place to park and you wait out the storm.
And for those of you who don't know, tier 4 is basically as good as it gets. There's tier 5, but you have to be perfect. So the only people who are going to be tier 5 are you guys who come in as new buyers who get to be tier 5 until your first safety incident.
Yeah.
But tier 4 is basically as good as it gets.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, did you have any that were supposed to go into California or the LA area at all these past
So
few?
I still have tractors going into LA. So I have tractors that go into Chino and to Rialto. At the moment, the conditions are pretty nasty. Visibility is low, and they're driving about 35 miles an hour on the highways, but they're not impacted by the fires yet in the Palisades or in Malibu in that area. The Chino and Rialto terminals are on the east side of LA. One's actually, I think, they're just, LA is just kind of weird. They're in LA County, but I don't actually think they're in LA proper.
Yeah.
So if that gives you an idea where they are, but they're both on the east side closer to the mountains as you go into Arizona and on high. They're off just off of Highway 40, and the fire is up more on the coast along Route 1. Now, I think there are some stations that are being impacted. I haven't heard anything specific, but I don't know a lot of California contractors.
Do you know at all how FedEx would handle something like that? Like if, say, no, like if you're in an area where you can't run or like you can't even get into Rialto, for instance, let's say, like how would do you know how FedEx would treat those?
So when we've had issues, for example, where we couldn't, like where there's been hurricane damage, or like when that tornado hit Nashville,
Yeah,
um, that was a couple years ago. They diverted us to alternate stations and they did overflow. So they found, I mean, in Nashville there has to be what, 6 stations on top of the 2 terminals that are in place,
yeah,
and so they would just the stations handled a lot of the overflow. They set up alternate locations where you just continue to operate, and they continue to bring packages in. Now, like when the situation happened in North Carolina, we couldn't get into Western North Carolina. They provided alternate routing, and so we were, using alternate routes to get into Greensboro and to get into as close as we could for our loads that had to go there. Or FedEx actually I think shipped water and shipped medical supplies. I think there's a FEMA contract with FedEx, and so FedEx is part of that FEMA network to bring in items. You generally, as a contractor, don't know what you're bringing in, but anecdotally, you'll hear about it that this is a water shipment or something like that. Um, I mean, I remember there was one point when one of the hurricanes hit New Orleans a couple years ago. There was a lot of contractors tasked with bringing in a lot of stuff because FedEx actually has a very large presence in Mississippi and Louisiana.
okay. That's cool. Yeah. And I would imagine with alternate routing, Linehaul's probably a little bit less impacted by things like this than, P&D. If you've got zip codes in, let's say in the fire zone, there's really nothing, like you're basically done until things are cleaned back up.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is like if you have an event like this and with the storm, for example, like I got all my teams out before the storm, to make sure that all my teams were not stuck multiple days in the row. My solo drivers, I just acknowledged that they were going to be stuck and there's nothing I can do about it. And so, but we made sure to get all our teams out, and then we constantly stayed running away from the storm. So like I had a team go to Colorado, when the snowstorm hit in Nashville and in Mississippi. And then from there, another storm came into Colorado, and so we went to Chicago. And then from Chicago, by then, like the storm had moved to Chicago, and so we moved into a different location. Or like I had a team that went up to onto actually the upper East Coast was fine for a lot of the storms. So we were doing runs between Woodbridge and Ohio until the storms blocked us off, and then we stopped where we were. We had other teams that went along I-10 in southern Texas and New Mexico until the dust clouds and the impacted them. But I mean, you just work with the weather. And I'll actually say I don't know about Motive or Ground Cloud. One of the coolest things is Lytx has this ability where you can actually go into their unified map and you can see what the road conditions are from the forward-facing camera of other vehicles on the road.
That's
So you
cool.
can actually log in and say, hey, what does it look like on I-80 in Wyoming? And you can click on a truck. It's a dot on that map, and it shows you live video of what the forward-facing camera looks like, and it's great.
Yeah.
So it allows us to make decisions. For example, there was a snow squall that went through in Lafayette, Indiana yesterday, and we told a driver to wait it out, and we stopped him in Indianapolis, had him take his rest break there. Instead of normally taking it up in Chicago, and he sat in Indianapolis until we told him to keep going. And then after the snow squall went through, we sent him on his way.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. That's actually really helpful. I didn't know that they had that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I don't think I have the ability to share my screen, but yeah, I can't share my screen on this, but um, it's a really cool feature. It's one of the things that I really love about Lytx. I know that there's pluses and minuses with all the vendor providers that we have, but this one is I mean, it's saved my bacon a lot of times.
All right. Well, I think that really hits a lot of what we wanted to talk about around weather, like kind of one, I think it's crucial to understand that you have protections both in terms of it's typically the right decision to make in terms of risk and cost, but also just knowing that there are legal protections that you can stand behind if you decide not to dispatch trucks into hazardous conditions. And that's always a choice you can and often should make as an operator. Um, Perfect. Well, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to go through our new inventory for the week and then some upcoming events that are coming in the next couple of months that are really exciting. And then we will open it up for pure Q&A. So as I'm going through this, if you haven't typed in a question, this is a good chance to do so. Put it in that Q&A while I'm reading through these. So it is the beginning of the year, so we've got a decent number of new listings, and you can expect to see that over the next few weeks as people come out of peak season, kind of look up and take a breath of fresh air and decide whether or not they're going to sell their business. This is when we get a lot of new inventory over these next few weeks. So first one's pickup and delivery out of Alabama. It is 13 P&D routes at 1.2 million, 20% margin, 14 employees, 13 trucks, and 2 managers. And this is a low mileage operation, and they're willing to do up to 20% seller financing, which is a little bit more than we normally see there on average. Next one's out of Mississippi. It's 14 P&D routes at 1.25 million, 18% margin, 15 employees, 17 trucks, and a manager. This is one has spare trucks as well. And you can actually in the chat too, if any of these are interesting as I'm going through it, there's a link to all of the new listings for the week. Next one's out of Louisiana. 13 P&D routes at 685,000. So this is a 15% margin, 15 employees, and 13 trucks. And this is a mix of residential and rural down in Louisiana. Next one's out of Georgia. It is 13 routes at 625,000, 10% margin, 15 employees, 10 trucks and a manager, a low mileage operation, and mainly newer vehicles as well. Next one's out of Illinois, 21 P&D routes at 2.35 million, so a little bit bigger operation at 20% margin, 26 employees, 27 trucks, and 2 managers. Another low mileage operation with some spare trucks as well. And then the last P&D one is out of Alabama. It's 27 P&D routes at 2.1 million, 18% margin, 31 employees, 45 trucks, and 3 managers. So 3 managers and a really large fleet there for a more rural territory out in Alabama. Next one is a Linehaul operation out of Georgia. This is 2 Linehaul runs at 245,000. These are 2 dedicated solo runs, 2 employees, and 3 trucks. So if you're looking for some runs in the Georgia area, we've got those this week. And then the last 2 are bread operations. So we've got one in Central Virginia. It's a Flowers bread route at 105,000. And then we've also got a Middle Tennessee bread route with Flowers at 61,000. So on the bread side, we've got Virginia and Tennessee. Linehaul, we've got Georgia. P&D, we got Alabama, Illinois, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and another out of Alabama. So any of those areas, if you have questions, we have all of the details on our site, but if you reach out to us, we can give you the full breakdown on financials and answer any questions you have on any of those. Now, on the event side, our full event calendar is out for the year, so you can go and see that now, but we've got a couple of happy hours coming up. We've got one in Orlando, actually, next week on January 21st, on Tuesday, January 21st. So if you're in Orlando, you can register for that. These happy hours are really just designed as chances to meet our team, other contractors in the area, vendors. We kind of bring everybody together. We cover all the food and drinks. It's free to attend. So if you're in the area, you can go ahead and register for that and join us next week. We did have a happy hour, unfortunately, in LA that was set for about 3 or 4 weeks from now. That one was actually, like 10 blocks away from the fire. So we are moving that, and we will have a new location announced very shortly, but it won't be LA. It'll still be out on the West Coast. It's just obviously there are for very good reasons, it's not a great place to have a happy hour right now. Linehaul specific though, we are doing a Linehaul road show, which is we didn't do these last year, but they're kind of new. We're bringing them back for this year, where they're kind of mini versions of what we do at the expo, where we concentrate on, a smaller subset of all of the things that we do here at Route Consultant. And so this one is going to be focused on line haul, and we're having it in Houston on March 28th. And so if you're interested in attending that, we have it's again free to attend. We'll provide the food and drinks. We're also going to have content, vendors. Alex and I will be there. There will be lots of presentations to kind of help you understand the space and what's going on. Also, if you're a new investor, we're actually doing a summit the day before as well, for anyone who's just trying to figure out if this is the right space for them or not. Again, also free to attend. So if you're a new investor and you want to come out to that summit, it's probably a good idea to stay for the roadshow the next day and kind of see all of that content, meet vendors, and see what contractors are thinking about in the line haul space. And we will have a kind of a schedule of content and events very soon for that roadshow. But again, it's March 27th and 28th in Houston. So those are the events. Again, we've got a lot more events coming throughout the year, and you can go see the full events if you look in the chat. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and look at the questions. So as I'm going through these, again, they don't have to be questions about what we talked about today. It can be anything in the line haul space, and Alex and I will do our best to answer them.
And I think there's one thing just to point out.
Yeah.
I know don't get disheartened by the fact that there's only one line haul operation that Josh is highlighting right now. Understand that, first of all, there's about 6,700 of us in the FedEx universe. One quarter of that number, actually one fifth, sorry, my apologies. One fifth of that number is line haul. So, when you get to looking at line haul or operations that are going to be for sale, there's always going to be about 5 times as many P&D operations for sale as there are line haul operations. And then if you think about it, think about it from a real estate perspective. At any given point of time, there's probably somewhere between 5 and 10% of the available market that is for sale. And that's just people getting old and retiring, people moving, people wanting to move into other businesses. A lot of it, though, is generally people wanting to retire. They've been doing this business for 10, 15, 20 years, and it's time for them to, well, maybe move to California. It used to be that dream, but
Yeah.
now it's like maybe move to Arizona, New Mexico, or Florida.
Yeah.
So.
Completely true. And it's why we often say, if you're trying to get in for the first time, don't be surprised if you may have to be a little bit more patient if line haul is your first step.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let's go to the questions. So the first one I see is a question here asking for good references for CPA and attorney in Ohio. If you actually will email info@routeconsultant.com with exactly what you're looking for, we'll just connect you directly with some references for any of those types of vendors. So again, it's info@routeconsultant.com, and we'll be happy to help you there.
And I will say one thing is that you don't need to have, I'm like, I live in Colorado. My attorney is in Illinois, and my accountant happens to be in Florida. You don't need to have somebody who's in your state. The magic of Zoom, the magic of Teams means that you can have face-to-face conversations all the time. So you just need somebody that you're comfortable with and somebody that you can have a great dialogue with. And most importantly, is going to be able somebody that you can text and is going to be responsive to you.
Yeah, and ideally, if they know FedEx, great. That's a huge help, especially on the attorney side. You're going to lose a lot of money and time trying to explain to an attorney how the FedEx model works. It's a lot easier if they are
Yeah.
already familiar. So I see a question here to put the safety reg number in chat. I don't 100% know what you're referring to. So if you want to give us a little more context, we're happy to help with whatever that request is. Next one's from Denny. So he's as a prospective buyer, he's curious if drones are in consideration for future use. Probably not in line haul.
Those would be some really big
Yeah,
drones.
yeah, I'd
So,
love to see
talking 50,
yeah,
something that can carry
I'm
50,
riding those drones, right? Like those are
50,000 pounds. I mean, that'd be huge. That'd be
yeah.
like a sky crane or something. I mean, you have some comments on this. I know that there are pilot programs going on in Arizona by FedEx using both air drones as well as like these little like dog-sized robots that take like shoe boxes and packages. You'll see them in some of their markets in Arizona. Um, you know, it's
Yeah,
cool looking.
yeah, as far as I've ever seen or read or heard, it is a thing that they're testing, and it could be a tool in the FedEx arsenal, but it just one drone use in general, there's a lot of regulations that would have to happen to be able to operate in any kind of scale that are just we're not there yet in terms of airspace regulation. And I think something Spencer always used to say and laugh at is if they try to run drones down here, they're just going to get shot out of the sky in the south. So, but I would say that is something that FedEx is for sure testing. But in terms of huge amounts of scale and effect on the network, we're still years at minimum
I
away.
mean, the biggest challenge that you have is that we don't move a lot of sub 5 pound boxes.
Yeah,
I mean, FedEx Express does through their documents and doing the prescription drug benefits, and so that might be an area for documents and prescription drugs. But I mean, most of the boxes that we're lugging around on the P&D side, if you talk to any P&D contractor, I mean, they're doing stuff that's over 5 pounds in weight, and they're up to 165 pounds. Josh, correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah, exactly.
So that's stuff that a drone can't easily move. So it's going to be a while before we get to that point. I mean, I get similar questions like, am I worried about driverless trucks? Not really. I mean, we're years away from it. And if we get to the driverless trucks, it's going to be FedEx telling me I need to buy driverless trucks. FedEx doesn't want to be in the asset business. They want to be asset light. So it's always going to be a third party provider, a TSP or an ISP, either putting in drones and work or putting in driverless trucks. FedEx doesn't want to be in that business. They want to take advantage of it, but at the end of the day, they want the assets owned by a third party vendor or a
Yeah.
third party provider.
If it's cheaper and safer for that to be the way, then that's a model we'll go towards. But one of the things we say often, FedEx is a large company and it's a big billboard anytime they do anything. So if there's any question of safety or consumer or kind of the consumer at large perception of something like a driverless vehicle, they're not going to be the first mover. They don't want to be the one that jumps out and tries one of those things, and they're the ones that have a large accident with a driverless vehicle or with a drone that is suddenly a huge case, and then their name's everywhere for all the wrong reasons. So it it is, like I said, years away at minimum, and really anything that's longer than probably 5 years is just not something that fits into a lot of our roadmap. Just there's so many things that will change and have to change between now and then that it's difficult to include in any part of strategy or planning at this point.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, we've had the ability for railroads to operate driverless for probably 30 or 40 years, and we still have to have a conductor and an engineer in every train.
Yeah.
So, because of like what happened in Ohio last year, you know,
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Next one here is from Eugene. So do you constantly have somebody watching like the Lytix camera, or is it just whenever you have an accident that you kind of run it back and check on what happened?
No, so what happens is, so there are key indicators that the machine learning in the different vendor providers, which is a video event device recorder, will categorize. So they are for line haul. I don't know what they are for P&D, but they're very similar. For line haul, it's wearing your seatbelt, using a handheld device, speeding, following distance. And following distance means what is the distance between you and the vehicle in front of you. Um, Speeding, seatbelts, handheld device, following distance. Um, there might be one more I can't think of. Am I missing one, Josh?
Speeding, seatbelt, handheld device, following distance. It's always there's either four or five, I can't remember, but the only difference between line haul and P and D is the following distance is instead stopping at stop signs for P and D.
Yeah. Um, and then what happens is like if you have an event with the MV plus AI now, your driver, except for following distance, for everything else, your driver is given a warning. So you'll have a machine, in Lytix, for example, it's a woman's voice that says handheld device, handheld device, or it'll say seatbelt, seatbelt. And it gives you your driver a warning. So they have a warning If they don't do anything, then it triggers an event which causes you to have a coaching opportunity. And then what I do in my operations, we do face-to-face meetings. And now we're at the point now where all repeat offenders, they will lose their safety bonus, their monthly safety bonus if they have an event. And then we do remedial training for, repeat offenders. So they'll get, additional electronic training, or they'll have to do a right seat ride with a manager. We take this very seriously, and we're trying to make sure that our drivers are utilizing proper behavior when they're out on the road.
Yeah. And also to be clear, you can jump in live on those cameras. It's just usually most people don't have managers like watching live. You have the capability, but that's typically not what they're used for. It's more of a coaching and correction type of tool.
No, I mean, the only time I ever jump in live and try to see what's going on is if if a driver is driving through dangerous conditions. And even then, it's not really like true live. You get like a herky jerky. It's
Yeah.
like a 1 second or a 3 second that the frame advances. So it's really not something that you really want to watch. Now, what I mean, there are some other areas that it's really helpful. Like I had a truck broken into about in June, and I was actually able to capture the culprit who broke into one of my trucks, and I got a screen. We took a screenshot of the face and reported it to the local PD, and let them handle that situation from there. You'll have other things like, I mean, your cameras are always recording, but the information, unless it becomes an event, is usually erased within between 7 days and 30 days, depending on your provider. But it's been really helpful. Like I had a tractor actually get hit by a yard switcher. And the yard switcher tried to tell us that it was our fault. And I'm like, okay, here's my vehicle. Here's the camera that shows you smacking into my vehicle that's parked and not moving. So, where do we want to go from there?
Yeah. I got a lot of cameras on this vehicle.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
And I think another important point for people who worry about it, FedEx also does not have a live feed into the vehicle. They can request video in the event of an accident, but they can't just jump in and watch over your driver's shoulder.
no. And it's really helpful. It's something that's really protective. Like uh, for example, I just had an incident where I got rear-ended by a drunk driver. The drunk driver saw I mean, regardless of the fact that I got rear-ended by a drunk driver, he tried to sue us because, it's FedEx on the side of the bill
Yeah.
on the side of the truck. We provided the video evidence, both to I mean, the PD had already done a police report, but we provided the video evidence to the lawyer that was suing us, and he immediately dropped the case. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty clear. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So the last question we have here, so it was the safety registration number 4. He was just asking about what the reference number in the
do
FMC.
you want me to do you just want me to type it in there, Josh?
Can you put it in the chat? Will it let you? Yeah. If you can put it in the chat where it'll go to
Chat.
everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. It's 49 CFR 392-14 or point 14.
Perfect.
And so like it's a really weird sign. And so I don't actually have the ability to type the sign. It's like that. It's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of almost like a dollar sign, but only has one line through it.
Yeah.
It's a legal thing. So CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulations. And 49 CFR actually is the FMCSA regulations that establishes the Department of Transportation and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.
So another one popped in. Are there any cameras on the back of the semi truck?
There are no cameras on the back of a semi truck. You can put cameras in the back of a semi truck if you want to. I know some guys who do a lot of spots actually have cameras on the back to make it easier for them to back into docks and to back into trailers. The main reason why there's no cameras on the back of trucks is that we're usually pulling a trailer. And that would be, we don't own our trailers. That's a FedEx thing. So FedEx owns the trailers, and FedEx is, willing to spend money, but only, up to a point. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think they want to put a camera on. I mean, there's got to be what, probably 100,000 trailers out there.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's that you don't own them, so it's a FedEx decision, and if FedEx decides not to, then that's why. And ideally, you're not doing a lot of backing, in your trailer. Yeah,
I will say that there are one of the things that's coming out is that these new trucks, I think model year 2025 or 2026, they're actually going to have cameras in each of the mirrors, to be able to help you with your blind spots. Um, so they're either embedded in the mirrors, or you'll see these tractors that have like these two, like they almost kind of look like antennas that stick out from the side of the doors. And those are other blind spot cameras. So we're starting to get that happening. I mean, that's the biggest risk, is still side swipes.
yeah,
I think it's the number one type of accident in the FedEx universe.
perfect. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So, Alex, thank you very much for being here and kicking off the year. And thanks everybody for being on. And as a last reminder, again, if you are in the Florida area, Orlando next Tuesday, hopefully we will see you there. It's free to attend. And then for everybody who's watching live, and everybody who watches later on YouTube, we will see you all next week on the next webinar. Thanks.
Take care. See ya.
Yeah.